Our next guest is Charlie Hartwell. Charlie is a managing partner of Bridge Builders Collaborative, a group of highly successful investors who have been investing in startup companies in the space of mental health, consciousness, and spirituality. Some of their investments include Pair Therapeutics, Insight Timer, Headspace, and Happify Health. Charlie, welcome to the Future of Wisdom or Future of Mindfulness and Technology Summit.
Hi, Soren. It's good to be here.
So I was telling you backstage, you've been doing this work longer than anybody I know. So could you tell us a little bit about how Bridge Builders came to be and what the vision of that was early on and kind of the inspiration of that?
Yeah, so my wife actually got me involved in the space, I don't know, 12 years, and then 12 years ago, I got connected through the Mind and Life Institute, which she got me involved in, to these three guys, Jeff Walker and Scott Krins and Austin Hurst. And they were asking the question whether the science of mindfulness had gotten to a point where there is anything to invest in. And they needed somebody to answer that question for them. So they hired me for 3 months to start a journey. And, now it's 10 years later and we've made 22 investments and, now we're 11 partners, and it's really amazing to see the difference that, the companies we've invested in have made in the world.
And can you tell us a little bit about the vision? What is the goal, the purpose, the intention of Bridge Builders Collaborative?
I really think we want to provide invitations for people to, to go deeper into mental health, consciousness, and spirituality. So we want to help people provide invitations for people to connect more deeply with themselves, to connect more deeply with others, and to connect more deeply with something greater than themselves without defining what that is.
Mm-hmm. And I think because I remember early on, I think you were the first investor in Headspace. We just had CC working on earlier today. Can you tell us about what inspired, what's kind of some of the key ingredients where you're like, wow, yeah, that made sense then. Headspace made sense then. Or something that makes sense now. And I was a part of, we did a wisdom awards with Scott Cranes in 1440 back in the day. And it was right around when Headspace was just developing, and they got a $25,000 grant. We awarded them early on. Wasn't an investment, was a grant. But even then I was thinking, meditate with your phone, that just seemed kind of weird. And I was very wrong. But how do you get a sense of where this is going and what makes sense? What becomes a yes to you or to members of the group?
Yeah, so just in this space, Soren, over the last 10 years, I've probably talked to 1,400 companies. So to see the number of entrepreneurs that are, pursuing their dream to make a difference in the space is pretty amazing. And the filters that we tend to use, our first filter is when you look at an idea. If you envision that it working, what kind of change would be created in the world because of that? Then the second part of that filter would be who's the entrepreneur, and really how deep is their practice, and how much have they integrated whatever practice that they have, or because we feel it's absolutely crucial that they're committed to doing their own personal work, and that the manifestation of their work is actually their deeper practice. And we ask other questions like, are they collaborative? Would they be fun to work with? Then we get into more of the typical things that you'd look at of what's the point of difference? How, what's the team like? If they scale, what's their intellectual property, or just what's unique and different. And then at the end of the day, we look at, what would be the return on investment if we could, imagine X, Y, or Z happening.
So I'm curious how you assess kind of the quality of the person. Do you insult them and see how they react? Do you criticize them? Because most everyone's going to say, I'm fun to work with. I've evolved. I've way evolved. My spiritual evolution is just crazy high. So how do you actually?
Well, that would be a no right there. If they said that, that would be a no. If they say I'm enlightened, then I probably am looking towards when does a phone call end?
Right.
So,
Is it an
you know,
intuitive thing? Is it a vibe? Yeah, or are there certain questions that you kind of assess?
I think it's more of an intuitive and then an experience. So, I'll have a conversation, we'll have another conversation. I think part of it is what's their vulnerability, then what's their actual practice been,
Mhm.
and for how long have they been doing it, and are they just in their head doing it, or have they integrated it into to where I can connect to them on a heart level,
Mhm.
and where are they willing to go in a conversation. Then I would say another key item for us would be like, how collaborative are they? So if they think they have all the answers,
Right.
then that's great. They can have that answers. But we tend to be investors that are curious and we're passionate about adding value. So for
Mhm.
us, it's like, okay, we want to have fun doing this. So are they going to be willing to at least listen to us? We never have to be right, but if they won't listen, and we can't have that kind of collaborative dialogue, then it's not a good fit.
Right.
And then there's just like I think there's just an energetic resonance, which I can't really describe. They
Sure.
probably feel it with us, and I feel it with them. So there's probably a whole bunch of people that have done a lot of deep work, that have a good business, and we
Right.
just might not hit it off, and that's okay too.
Great. I'm curious if you might share a little bit, Charlie, about how you entered the space. Most people, in terms of the consciousness space, most people have some kind of story or experience that kind of led them on this path. Were there a number of things that got you interested in this, or did you have your own personal experience on particular topics or challenges that you were facing that made you want to commit to this area? And take the
So
time to listen to 1,400 startups share their stories of how they're creating a better world.
So as is with many people, my story starts with suffering, and I am stubborn enough where it actually took three forms of suffering to get me, to a point of opening. So I think it was about 18 years ago. My father and grandfather, who were my role models, both died within a couple of years of each other. I was running a business. Had always been successful at business. The business wasn't turning out the way that I had hoped it had. So that was another part of, watching something die. And the third, was I was in a marriage that had been dead for years, and I wasn't willing to admit it. I had a dream one night that I was climbing the World Trade Center, and I knew what I was going to do when I got to the top. I had never been suicidal, nor did I wake up, feeling suicidal, but I woke up and just said, I need help. And, in my family system, therapy was not something that was embraced. I went and found, a good therapist, and that was the beginning of my journey of conscious awakening, or whatever you want, whatever that is. But I was, it took quite a bit of suffering to get me to that point.
Got it. Got it. And I know, can you talk a little bit about how that impacts your own investing? We were talking kind of backstage on kind of the realization that our society is coming to on the trauma that we all carry, whether we're in a war or not in a war, or from a wealthy family or from a poor family. There's this sense of this hurt and this trauma that we've experienced. And I know early on, Bridge Builders is primarily one of the initial big funders of meditation and mindfulness apps, and that was definitely still going and still has a momentum. Could you tell us a little bit about kind of how you see the journey now? What are the areas that you're most excited about, and what are the questions you're asking?
Yeah. So 3 years ago, my wife Maureen said to me, Charlie, you've been investing in the gateway drugs to higher level of consciousness, and it's time to go deeper. And when
Mhm.
I'm smart, I listened to her, and I integrated that. And what was interesting was the way the universe works. Once I sort of said, yes, that makes sense. Within 6 weeks, I got reconnected to Bo Shao, who you were talking with earlier. Bo was launching his the $100 million fund, at Evolve, and that's what he was all about.
Yeah.
Then at our annual partner meeting, our partners sat down and said, "Look, our companies are all successful. They don't need our money anymore. This isn't about just making money. This is about what impact we can create. So what do we do now?" And we came up with this strategy of going deeper.
Mhm.
So what we're passionate about is going deeper into helping people, with deeper connections, to help with deeper levels of mental health, to get to that place of saying, okay, what is the trauma that I'm experiencing? How is that embodied in my life? How can I move past that trauma? What is my, why am I here on the planet?
Yeah.
What am I, what would be joyful for me to be doing to execute my purpose, whatever. And so we really began to look at deeper levels of mental health. We began to look at the psychedelic space. We began to look more at social connection because we're facing this huge loneliness epidemic. And we just want to, I think deeper levels of just conscious awareness. So, back to Headspace for a second, with so much appreciation for what they've done. Tens of millions of people have begun meditating for 10 or 20 minutes a day. That is, I would say, a gateway drug. That helps people to get less stressed and to become a little more embodied or aware, but that doesn't necessarily take you back to the trauma that's causing the suffering in the first place. So our passion is how do we get people to to the place where they can really move past that. They can understand what that trauma is and move past it.
And where do you see? I know it's a new and emerging field, so it's kind of like bursting at the seams. So I know there's a lot that's just kind of coming about now. And I also saw that you all invested in a company in Amsterdam that takes truffles that has kind of somewhat psychedelic components and helps that as a healing modality. What are some of the areas you're seeing here, or do you feel like it's just starting to emerge? And where do you see the for-profit versus the nonprofit support in that area the most useful?
Yeah. So I'll talk about the psychedelic space just on its own for a second, because that's developing both in the for-profit and in the nonprofit space. And we've made the one investment that you described in Synthesis. We'll have made 3 others that I can announce within weeks from now. But I'm really actually quite concerned about the psychedelic space, because what's happening is this amazingly powerful way for people to get to the deep levels of trauma and to move past it in a very efficient manner, is coming into a capitalist system that is sorry, I've got my dog is barking.
You're human.
I'm human. But there are now 40 plus, maybe 50 publicly traded psychedelic companies. So there's all of this investment going into, and valuations are increasing. And I'm not sure that all the money is like integrated money. It's really about how much money can we make off this space. Whereas the way we approach it is really about how can we help to co-create this movement towards psychedelics that is really incorporating amazingly well-trained practitioners and with a setting that will facilitate healing. There's great promise in that. And then I have good a healthy level of concern as well.
Yeah.
The
concern is that money would start to become forefront, and the healing, what's best therapeutically, will become secondary, and it'll just be kind
absolutely
of turning out people without really doing the real work.
Well, and then when you have all these publicly traded companies, I have concerns with, okay, so really have the entrepreneurs, I go back to, what we look at it, have the entrepreneurs actually experience this? How's it changed their life? Have they integrated this practice that they're going to be presenting to other people? And when it gets down to where you've got all these companies competing for which drug is going to, or a compound or medicine, whatever you want to describe it, is going to be, there probably aren't going to be 40 different companies in the space. I get down to where what trade-offs are they willing to make? What claims are they willing to make? Are they willing to take not well-trained practitioners to use their to facilitate these healings? I mean, I've had enough experiences of concern. Like I'll just say one. I had a friend who went to a ketamine clinic. Ketamine's legal in the US. There are many ketamine clinics. And in the middle of their session, their therapists started talking about their own PTSD. So you're in this sort of, this different, very receptive state. And then when somebody brings their own projection into that space, that doesn't facilitate healing. That facilitates, more trauma, probably. So I say there's great promise in that movement. It needs to be well stewarded. And I also have, I have a lot of concerns.
Yeah. And so it sounds like there'll be some announcements in the coming weeks on the areas that you're, at least for now, have decided to put resources to. Do you want to share? I don't necessarily want you to go too personal, but like, is this something you realized I have my own trauma I need to understand, and I realize I'm seeing this trauma in the world? And so how has that came about through the team? Are they seeing it both on a personal level and also on a societal level? And what's the vision? Is the vision that we will be able to intervene at earlier times and be able to heal our trauma, and with kids and young people? Kind of a broad question there, but any thoughts on that?
So first
Because
of all,
I do think some people, I guess I'm saying, some people really care about this, but they haven't really done psychedelics themselves, but they really care about this and want to support it. And they kind of intuitively know it's important, but they haven't necessarily had that direct experience. They haven't gone to Peru or gone to San Francisco or wherever they go. And so I do think there is this willingness and interest and concern that so many people have as a society. And if you look at a traumatized society and who we elect as president and how we decide policies, there's a strong argument that we live in a very trauma-based culture. And so healing that trauma would allow us to create a whole different culture. I want more people to join, but I think the economics, like you said, if the economics run the show, this has a danger of having some really bad experiences for people, and then the whole movement gets cut off, right? Because then they're like, you read enough stories of people having traumatizing experiences, and then the whole thing kind of ends. So, what's your sense of what we can do to best support this?
Okay, so what you just said, like, I think it's an hour to, the questions you were just talking about is an hour conversation on its own. So first, let me just say at Bridge Builders, as an investment group, so we have 11 partners. We have an annual meeting next week. It is all about going deeper. And not with psychedelics. It's just about a practice of going deeper. We're not going to talk about business. Right. We're just saying and one of my partners said to me, if I want to use my capital to support change in the world, then I have to do my own personal work first. Yeah. Right. And I'm not saying that's psychedelic or not psychedelic, because that psychedelics are only one path. There are actually technologies that we could talk about, that where I see the technology itself could be akin to a psychedelic experience. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, I don't believe that these plants are, going to heal the world. I believe that they're a tool to facilitate more efficient healing. And scientifically, they're being proven to do that. So we look for technologies, and that can be light-based technologies we're looking at, that can be music-based technologies that we're looking at, that that can aid and assist in that healing process. So we came to say, if we're going to go deeper, which is our strategy as an investment group, then psychedelics is one tool that seems to be really efficient. And if it's done correctly, it could change our entire behavioral health system. And so we focused on that as one of the areas to focus on, not as the area to focus on.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you for that. And are there other trends that you're seeing? So definitely the psychedelic trauma healing, I think, is a big trend that's emerging. I know there's a lot more in the wearable space. What are, because you get a view of everybody seems to come to you, or a lot of people come to you. So you get a sense of the field. How do you see this field currently in the mindfulness and technology space? What are areas you think are really strong, and what are areas where you would love to see more innovation?
So first of all, there are some pretty amazing technologies through VR, through, as I said before, light technology, et cetera, that are helping to facilitate deeper experiences. Many of them are things you'd want to do, with a therapist. Some of them you can do as a consumer, but all of them, I think this is, this process is one that should be supported by friends or, or other people. Transformation is not just a one person
and this would be like
experience.
energy we can use the phrase maybe energy healing or that
Correct.
whole domain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm really interested in as well, what kind of alternative practices are out there that, there's so many alternative practitioners. How do we prove the benefits of those types of of those types of practices? And how do we help bring those into our medical system as tools to promote healing? So I'm looking at that. I really believe social connection. You've talked about it a lot at Wisdom 2.0. It's like, how do we actually begin to get more connected to ourselves and to other people as well? You and I have talked about this in the past, Soren. I'm really interested as to how we support the rebalancing of what bad, maybe good or bad terms are resonant, or I'm just going to call it, how do we rebalance the sacred masculine and sacred feminine on the planet? So I've looked at business models that are really helping men to get more vulnerable, because I think men are so disconnected from their feminine sides. So things that can help people be more authentic and to, develop greater emotional intelligence. There's so much happening. It got to a point, I think 3 years ago, where for a long time, I thought I knew everyone in the space. Because as you said, I've been the longest, probably serving it the longest. And, amazingly, and this is such great news, I don't anymore, because so many people are doing these incredible things. And so what I'm fascinated with, which is, how do entrepreneurs develop tools to support this transformation and to make it so that, it's not just the tools, but they're developed in a way that are engaging, that are authentic, and are well packaged. I'll just say one other thing before to wrap this up. One of the big transformations in this space from when Wisdom 2.0 first started and when you and I first started talking is, apps were developed that were really sort of consumer centric. And what I'm seeing is like every company, and then now almost every insurance company is integrating these programs and looking at these programs. They're also being, incorporated into health systems. And to me, that means that the work that we've been doing is going to scale. The question is, how deep do people want to go, and are they willing, to go to the next steps and then integrate those into those, companies and insurers and healthcare systems.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and then you're right. I mean, when we first connected, what was it, maybe 12 years ago, there was nothing. There were very, very few options, and now we're seeing this huge movement and multi-billion-dollar valuations, and traditional investors are now coming into this space that kind of never were there before. And so I think it's a really, really exciting time. And it's also at a time where we could always just stay at the surface, right? Again, doing our little 2-minute practice or whatever it is, and not really get to the depths. And I appreciate that focus and that intention, which is just like, for us to really create a healing society, we have to heal as individuals, and we have to kind of support that in the world. And we just have a few minutes left, Charlie, but is there anything on your heart and mind that we haven't touched on that you feel really is important to be able to give voice to?
No, this has been like really pretty comprehensive from my vantage point. And just this, I so appreciate the Wisdom 2.0, audience and group that's there, that are committed to, to doing their own work. And then so many great entrepreneurs, are here, have been involved in the community, and is, I think it's just time to express appreciation for their creativity and entrepreneurship, and and taking a really difficult path of starting companies in the space. And there's a lot of them, and I just say I appreciate that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Do you want to say a little bit? I know Bridge Builders kind of looks for, if there's startups here, people, entrepreneurs here who are super interested. I know Bridge Builders probably looks at people a little. Can you say just a little bit about when people should contact you and when they shouldn't? So that.
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
And the Bridge Builders Collaborative, my guess is bridgebuilderscollaborative.com.
It's just BB Collaborative, the 2-letter B's,
okay.
bbcollaborative.com. So thank you for that question. We're normally Series A
Okay.
investors. We tend to believe that we can add the most value when people are growing their businesses versus developing their businesses, and Series A tends to be that point. We've made a few exceptions over the years where when something, sort of the more revolutionary the concept is, at least from our perspective, we'll go earlier with smaller amounts of money. But in general, our sweet spot is Series A.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all the work you're doing. And again, I love the invitation to go deeper. And I think that's an invitation for each one of us here, and both for entrepreneurs, for venture funds. Thank you so much for sharing that vision, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Soren. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks again, Charlie.
All right.